defense doesn't matter, right? You should not go into a game like this and try to use the defense to predict who's going to win. And I think it's very important for us to talk about this because people misconstrue this all the time. We talked about it with Josh when he came on. Defense doesn't matter simply means that offense is what is most predictive. And actually, this game was a perfect example of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were told the entire, sort of going into the game that Green Bay was more stout up front than Seattle. And they were. I mean, they pressured Wilson on more than 50% of his dropbacks. But ultimately, Russell Wilson and the Seahawks outgained the Packers. They made a lot of plays. Wilson had a 106 passer rating when pressured. Their yards per play were actually higher than their historical average for the season. I think they were something like 5.7, and they were a little bit, So Seattle, the Seahawks were yards per play this year. This is a great podcast. Yeah, but they both teams had higher yards per play than they did during the season. Both defenses sort of gave up things that they didn't give up during the season. And ultimately, the Packers made just a couple extra plays, and Seattle refused to make a couple extra plays. And that's why, if you bet Seattle +4, +4.5, you lost by a point or a half a point. And if you laid the points with Green Bay, congratulations.
Great offense is going to beat any defense. It doesn't matter how good they are. They got Aaron Rodgers into these 3rd and longs, and it didn't matter because he was able to get Devontae Adams where he wanted him. He was able to get Jimmy Graham where he wanted him and delivered the ball in a perfect position. It was his highest graded game pending review since week 6, which was at home against Detroit.
To your point about Wilson, in the 42 dropbacks that we have charted, 35 of them resulted in a dropback of 2.6 seconds or more, just 7
ridiculous.
In under 2.5 seconds.
It's absurd.
His average time to throw, to actually throw the football was 3.8 seconds. His average time to sack was 4.8 seconds. I'm sorry. If you are, the Seahawks did a good enough job pass protecting tonight. They
were actually really solid.
And Wilson, and to our, as we've written up a number of times, part of the defense doesn't matter thing is that quarterbacks own their own pressure rate. Like, he invited that stuff, and granted, he had a 107 rating when hanging onto the ball too long, but those sacks took a toll, and that's why things like EPA are a better way to measure quarterback play and then passer rating.
Yeah, I mean, the sacks were brutal on the 2-point conversion, right? Also, just doesn't see the pressure.
Yep.
I mean, I think his overall average time to throw, which wraps all those things together, was 4 seconds. It's a solid second longer than the highest one in the league this year, and where Rodgers is usually out, where Wilson's usually out, which is 3 seconds. Yep. That's a long time. I mean, he held onto the ball forever, and he makes a lot of really good plays. He made a lot of good plays with his legs in this game.
He has in recent weeks done a really good job running with the football, which was not something he was doing early in the season. Too bad it was not enough here.
Running the ball is not predictive of future success. But when a team is outmatched in a game, it is the result of a domination.
Exactly.
And so we often attribute it. We're like, oh, hey, they dominated this game. Why? Well, they have 200 rushing yards. It's like, well, no, actually, they got a lead by throwing the ball, and then your team was so terrible that they just got run on for the rest of the game.
Well, and then we're going to talk about college football in a little bit, but that's exactly how college football is. Like, Clemson plays Virginia, and they get ahead with a few passing touchdowns, and then they just are more dominant than the other team the rest of the game, and that manifests itself in the run game, right? Because their linemen are better, and that was true about Minnesota too. I mean, Dalvin Cook had 9 carries for 18 yards. Alexander Mattison 1 for 3. Pat Elflein is not a starting guard in the NFL. Garrett Bradbury has some work to do, and Josh Klein, was sort of a middling free agent signee, and then their right tackle Brian O'Neill got injured in the game, so San Francisco up front was just better than Minnesota, and then Kirk Cousins is one of those quarterbacks that needs a good foundation, right? And the foundation was laid against the Saints by a few players being out for New Orleans, right? And Minnesota scheming up a good set of plays. Thielen gets injured in practice. They're just flat out less athletic than the 49ers in that intermediate level. Rudolph Smith, they're just not as good as Warner and Quan Alexander and Jakuski Tartt and those safeties. So they just had no mismatches other than Diggs against Witherspoon, and that was sewn up pretty quickly. And then Kirk had really nothing. And then when the interesting thing is we talked about Jimmy G's struggles and how it sort of kept the Seahawks in the game and it kept the Rams in the game. And to Kyle Shanahan's credit, when Jimmy G started to fold a little bit, they just went straight to the run game, and they knew that 4-point lead that
was really more than 4 points.
Yeah.
I actually, people were saying, that he's protecting Jimmy G by not letting him throw the ball after that bad interception. I think that's total baloney. The reason that they started running the ball is because the Vikings didn't want to play defense.
Yep.
Like, they were just getting blown off the line of scrimmage every time, and he was acutely aware of the simple fact that their offense only had these points because of a situation that had been mediated already. So he had nothing to worry about. So it's like, why would I even bother having my quarterback drop back pass, who, by the way, looked like he had a potentially horrific injury in the game, right? Like, the takeaway that I have from that is not about Kyle Shanahan not having faith in Jimmy G. It's about him being acutely aware of the Vikings sucking.
Yeah.
I purposefully did not look at any of the lines. I know you can't contain yourself, so I know you already know what the line is. I think Kansas City should be favored by 8.5. You want to let me know that I'm going to guess that it's higher.
Nope. It is 7.5.
Really?
It opened at 6 when Tennessee was like in the driver's seat in that game. And now it's been bet up to 7.5, but it's 115 to Tennessee side, obviously getting the hook at 7, 105 at Kansas City side. It's interesting to me that Kansas City getting behind by that much and then just steaming Houston is worth 1.5. Mm-hmm. But that's, recency bias is what it is. But total on this game, 52, which would have been covered in the first half of today's game with Kansas City versus Houston. So what do you think?
That's interesting. The reason I had it at 8.5 is that Tennessee has played, they've gotten a lot of really good bounces. Right, so they played a Patriots team who offensively is just inept. And then they went into Baltimore, and all the things that we talked about going wrong for Baltimore, which were, fumbles, interception, like those things that just hadn't happened for Lamar Jackson all year happened. They also go 0 for 2 on 4th downs. Like, they get both of those things to happen for them. And if they don't get all of the bounces to go their way, then they all of a sudden have to rely on Ryan Tannehill. Mm-hmm. And as he's been fine, but I'm going to take Pat Mahomes over Ryan Tannehill, and by a large margin. And for Green Bay, I thought San Francisco would be favored by 6.5, and you said it's 7.
It is 7.
So that tells you that I actually would bet Green Bay getting 7 in this game. If I was going with my number here, 7 though I think feels about right, and it probably goes to show that outside of Wisconsin, people probably didn't take that 5-point win as meaning a ton.
Yep.
They are going on the road. The last time they went to San Francisco, by the way, we backed Aaron Rodgers.
We did. We absolutely. We bet on Green Bay that night.
One of the poorest performances in his career, but that's long in the past, right? Now he looks awesome. I think the big difference here is that the San Francisco offense right now is really tough to stop. Unless you get Jimmy G throwing straight to a linebacker, they are going to expose every weakness that you can possibly have. And on the flip side, they're not going to allow Davante Adams to just run free, right? And so I think they make it a little harder on the Packers.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel from PFF.